Welcome to this Employee Benefits Insights How-To session, Breakthrough Thinking to Reinvent HR. The speaker of this session will be on hand in the live chat room on the right of your screen to answer any questions you may have. The Q&A will then continue for up to 10 minutes after the session has finished. Don't forget to follow us and get involved on social media by using the hashtag EBInsights21. Please welcome Natalie Hazenberg, HR and Transformation Strategist at ABN AMRO Bank NV.
Welcome. My name is Natalie Hazenberg, and for the past 20 years, I dedicated myself creating a better workplace for people in organizations, also known as HR. The days that I have achieved most were the days that I have been true to myself. Before I start my story, I would like to ask you a question. When was the last time you felt really energized at work? Just think about it for a while. In this talk, I will tell you about how we can make this happen for more people and why it is important. We all know the latest HR trends. And we all know that the traditional ways of organizing have reached their expiration date. The role of HR, in my opinion, is to rehumanize organizations. People ask me why I still work for ABN AMRO with all this passion and drive. You can start your own business, they say. Well, I actually have my own business. But I very consciously choose to work for ABN AMRO as well. Through my work there, I can reach 23,000 people worldwide. As HR professionals, we have a tremendous chance to make a positive impact on the lives of many people. In the next 10 minutes, I want to talk you through the methodology of break that I use and hope you can take it forward. I did not sit down and create this methodology. It created itself because I was actually doing it. And because it worked, more and more people asked me for my advice. All those cups of coffee started to have the potential of a full-time job. So then I decided to write it down in a book, so I could share it more easily with more people. And because I wrote it in a book, I created the acronym BREAK, B-R-E-A-K, for 5 steps towards a tipping point for change. But let me start at the beginning, and by telling you my story of how this works for me, and I will walk you through the 5 steps. My first breakthrough was with performance management. For more than 10 years, I have seen colleagues struggling, trying to modernize performance management. For years, it had been a dissatisfier. It wasn't motivating for people. I wasn't responsible for performance management, but I wanted to make a difference anyway, because I heard many people complain, and no one had the answer. The situation was very complex due to the collective labor agreement and other regulations. This brings us to the first step. There were many barriers. This calls for breakthrough thinking. Breakthrough thinking is particularly helpful if the change you would like to see is not easy. The playing field is complex, or there are many barriers like these. And in many large organizations, there are often barriers for change. I will get to that a bit later, and on how to identify these barriers. So I came up with the idea to experiment with performance management. Now we get to the R of road. The road I chose to take a first small step on. I pitched my idea with the HR management team, and they supported it. They even started thinking about which experiments we could conduct. But I stopped them in their tracks, because I felt they hijacked the idea already with their thoughts. I told them they should give the teams really a blank sheet and listen and learn from those teams what they actually need to manage their performance, instead of creating a limited set of options. Start small and be open. This was really new to them. They didn't need to be in charge, but just be curious. The fact that they supported it means there was energy for the initiative. So they gave the person responsible for performance management the assignment to start experimenting. After 2 to 3 weeks, nothing happened, so I asked him if I could help. This is a very important part of the E of energy. Make people work on things that they actually care about. Not just because it is part of their role. He told me he was busy managing the current process, and although he had to come up with a future vision for performance management, he only had time for some outside-in research. This is how many great ideas strand. I would not let that happen, because I felt I was onto something that could make a big difference for many people. By offering my help, I could take back charge of the experiments and keep it moving. It was not invented by him, so he didn't feel the engagement that I had on the topic. But I did connect with him, and we worked together to create a future vision for HR with the insights of the experiments. The E of energy is all about creating space for people to work on the things that they really care about. But it's not very common that organizations do that. Create a guiding coalition and make the connection. This is all about the third step, the E of energy. This often is a very underestimated step, and as you will hear in my story, it is challenged many times. Therefore, the steps are almost never in a chronological order. So the A of action started with 5 teams. We learned a lot from the teams. Also, how difficult it was to think for themselves after all these years of top-down goal setting. Mind you, I was still not responsible for performance management at that time, and I had no funding. I recruited 2 interns to help me monitor the experiments, and one of them graduated on it and is actually still working for us. Breakthrough thinking calls for creativity, opening up possibilities. Then new barriers came up, because one of the HR directors decided to buy a new HR system from SuccessFactors, which actually at the time was still based on traditional year cycles. And most of our teams just found out that didn't work for them anymore. So we were back to the B of barriers. Here you see that it is not always a chronological order. If so, I would have called it step 1 to 5. The challenge was to keep the E of energy on the experiment. Breakthrough thinking is not easy. You will have setbacks, and then it is easier to pull the plug and forget why you even started. Choose your battles. But I challenged the teams to keep on experimenting and learn how the system could help them anyway. This provided us with insights in how we could tweak the system to make it more future-proof. A win-win in the end. Other ways of how we made sure there was enough E of energy was to keep involving senior management. We organized inspirational sessions for the experimenting teams and other people who were interested. We made our senior leaders tell why they supported this. This has to do with what I call the language of persuasion. Every organization has a way of doing things, getting things done. Within ABN AMRO, it helps if senior management is openly supportive. So more and more people joined in. If it doesn't work, well, we learned a lot. That's why we called it experiments. And because we called it experience, it was more safe for people to join in. That's what experimenting is all about. You either validate or invalidate the experiment. It created a learning mindset. In the end, more than 20 teams were officially part of the experiment, and the learnings were used to reinvent our performance management in a way that would probably not have happened if it wasn't for the actual experience of what works and what doesn't. More and more people changed their opinions because it was already working. The tipping point for change had been reached. So kudos, we did it. The K of kudos and the last letter of break. So it always starts with the first step and it always ends with kudos, hopefully. But in the process you will be challenged to keep the E of energy flowing and be open to change your R of road or the A of action. Needless to say, this is not a story about reinventing performance management. A lot of companies did that in the past 10 years. It is about making things happen that are so needed for people. With me, it just started with performance management. The concept of break is a change approach driven by pioneers. Pioneers who create impact by starting small and make the system work for them. Pioneers who contribute to the bigger picture by triggering the learning organization, provoking the tipping point for change. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight, especially in large bureaucratic companies. The whole process took almost 2 years, but change already started with the first step. And if you connect your initiative to the agenda of others, you create a catalyst for change. As I said before, I would get back to you on the barriers and how to identify them. After I achieved my results with performance management, I started focusing on organizational agility. I tried to identify the barriers for organizational agility and started working on more topics with the steps of break. I realized the barriers often appear on different levels, and these levels can actually reinforce each other to make change even harder. I identified 3 levels: organizational structure, how we are organized, the processes, how do we work, and the mindset, beliefs that influence behavior. To give an example, from the perspective of my quest towards more organizational agility, I saw that we had a very hierarchical structure with many managers and sometimes even managers with just one direct report. People experience slow decision making. Also, our HR processes were all organized around the relationship between manager and employee. If all our managers would have the right set of leadership skills, that wouldn't have been a problem. But because employees were so depending on their managers to give them space to develop or take on challenging roles, only the ones that had a great people manager were the lucky ones. People like to make use of their talents and potential. In our employee engagement survey, we identified that as a key driver. But in all these people topics, we are very dependent on our leaders. People told me, my manager can make or break me. So I identified barriers in the structure, in processes, and in leadership mindset. After diving into these barriers, I tried to come up with a first step to take. How can we make people less dependent of their managers? And how can we speed up decision making to become more agile as an organization? The answer came to me in the form of self-organizing teams, the road I chose. At that time, my manager was not so fond of this idea, no E of energy. But I felt that the organization, there was a lot of energy on the idea. So I decided to write a blog about it, a first small step. The blog was to get a feel of the appetite, and it got viral. Then the senior manager came up to me and said she had a vacancy for a manager in one of her teams. But the team asked her not to fill in this vacancy because they wanted to start as a self-organizing team. Again, they had the E of energy on it. She asked my advice, and we decided to make this our first experiment. We took action. And here again, we followed the 5 steps of break. Long story short, after a year, the team was the best performing of all the credit risk teams, and like with performance management, more teams followed. At this moment in time, the whole retail part of the bank is working in a self-organizing manner with around 4,000 employees. This did not only help to speed up decision making, we also created a work environment where people could make better use of their talents. There was more room for authenticity because the work was organized around the people and not anymore in a traditional org chart with strict job descriptions. With less managers and more people taking responsibility, we created a more fun workplace. But also this didn't happen overnight, and we are still learning. But the tipping point has been reached. There is no way back. We changed the mindset of people. Many of these changes in HR processes have to do with those 3 levels. And the challenge for HR is to look at this and act on it in an integrated way. These 2 examples of performance management and self-organizing teams caused a lot of disruption in our HR processes. We had to totally reinvent them due to the fact that the relationship between manager and employee wasn't anymore the logical place to address things. For example, if an employee had to call in sick, a self-managing team doesn't have a manager. Where and how does he call in sick? We had to change our mindsets as well as our processes. Now we give more trust. Employees and teams get more mandate on people issues, even hiring their own colleagues. These are just a few examples of how we use breakthrough thinking to innovate HR processes. So I created the metaphor around getting ABN AMRO out of the harness and unleashing the potential of people working for us. But it calls for breakthrough thinking to make this happen. I got more space to work on these topics, including proper resources. And with my team in the last years, we have been focusing on reinventing our HR processes to enable these new ways of working. We also designed a skill-based future-proof job model that reinforces our new mindset. It is being implemented as we speak by another team. This is because I am creating a breakthrough on the next big thing: flexible use of talent in the ecosystem of the internal and external labor market. We use internal gigs, we call smart jobs, and cross-sector mobility experiments to create more people mobility. My ambition is that people in organizations are more energized more often because they do the work they care about. They make use of their talents and energy, and they develop themselves based on their drivers. This I call organizing in a human-centric way, or rehumanizing organizations. To engage others, I created this future press release. So we get to the end of my story. If you want to know more details, just get in touch. And for the Dutch participants, you can read my book. In my book, I wrote down more examples of how this break methodology can help you reach the tipping point for change. I wrote the book because I hope to inspire people like you to not give up working on things you believe make the world and the workplace a better place. Things that are not easy to change. I donated the revenues of the first edition to charity, hoping that made more people buy the book and be inspired to take action. And if not, well, at least I did make a difference with that. That's how I care about making the world of work a bit more human again. It gives me energy to be authentic to myself and what I believe in. Organizations are no entity in itself. It is the sum of the people who work there. I feel that HR can have a more positive impact on empowering employees if we start learning with them what is needed. We are the connectors of humans. I invite organizations to create space to follow where the energy flows in people and make use of momentum more often. I bet they will be much more successful in realizing their goals. For me, this is unleashing the human potential, and it starts with being true to yourself. So what is your authentic goal, and how are you going to bring that in motion? I wish you all to find your breakthrough. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this session. Please be sure to ask any remaining questions you may have in the live chat. Our next session, How Can You Make Benefits and Reward Engaging Without Costing the Earth, will take place at 11 a.m.